I never expected that opening my home to family would open the door to heartbreak. When my sister asked if her son, Daniel, could stay with me for a few months while he attended a nearby college, I didn't hesitate. At 39, living alone, in a quiet suburb, I was used to silence. Daniel, just 22, was polite, respectful, and carrying the kind of quiet sadness I knew all too well. We were both looking for something. Comfort, perhaps, or just someone who wouldn't leave. At first, it was simple. He settled in quickly, always thanking me for the smallest things. He made coffee every morning, watered my plants, and sometimes left sticky notes on the fridge that read, "Don't forget to smile today." I laughed at his silliness, grateful for the warmth he brought into my otherwise colorless days. We talked often, late into the night sometimes. He told me about his broken relationship with his father, his dreams of starting a business, his love for old jazz records. I told him things I hadn't spoken aloud in years, about my failed marriage, the child I lost, the ache that never quite left. Somehow the age gap between us faded. We weren't aunt and nephew in those moments. We were just two lost people, trying to understand life. He listened in a way no one had in a long time, his gaze steady and full of concern. Once, I'd come home late from work, clearly exhausted. Without a word, he took my bag, set dinner on the table, and simply said, "You do so much. Let me take care of things tonight." My heart swelled. Not romantically, not yet, but with gratitude so deep it frightened me. In the weeks that followed, we developed routines, shared tea on the porch, weekend grocery trips, Sunday movie nights. Sometimes, I'd catch him watching me with a softness that was easy to misread, or maybe I wanted to misread it. I told myself it was just admiration, the bond of family. Still, when our fingers brushed while passing dishes, or when he rested, his head on my shoulder during a tearjerker film, something in me stirred. I never voiced these thoughts. They were just flickers, uncomfortable, inappropriate, and quickly dismissed. But those flickers grew harder to ignore. I told myself boundaries would hold. I was the adult. I was the safe one. Then came the night I found myself standing outside his room, hesitating before knocking to say goodnight. I didn't. I turned back to my own room, unsettled by my own emotions. Looking back, I think that's when the line between comfort and danger began to blur. Not through action, but through feeling. And feelings, when left unchecked, can twist truths in the quietest ways. I trusted him. I trusted myself. And perhaps that's what makes what followed so difficult to accept. Because trust, once broken, doesn't make a sound. It simply vanishes. And in our home, silence had returned. It was one of those nights that feels heavier than it should. The rain tapped against the windows with relentless rhythm, and the whole house seemed quieter than usual. Daniel had picked out an old film to watch, something black and white and slow-paced. I barely paid attention to the screen. My mind was cluttered. With work, with memories, and, if I was honest, with him. He sat close beside me on the couch, his warmth brushing against my arm. I told myself it was normal. Family could sit like this. But every time he shifted slightly, leaned in to whisper something about the movie, or laughed softly at a scene, a part of me tensed. It wasn't fear, it was confusion. A dangerous, unspoken confusion that neither of us addressed. I poured myself a glass of wine, then another. He refused politely, resting his hand on my wrist for a moment, just long enough to leave a mark on my thoughts. "You've had a long week," he said. "You should let yourself rest." It sounded caring, innocent, but I couldn't ignore the slight change in his voice, the way it lingered at the edge of something unfamiliar. We finished the movie and sat in silence. I didn't want the night to end, but I also wanted to run from it. Daniel got up and started tidying the living room, gathering empty cups and cushions. I stood too quickly, almost tripping. He caught my elbow to steady me. "You okay?" he asked, his tone dipped in concern. "Yes," I said too. Fast. Just tired. He walked me to my room as he sometimes did, switching on the hallway light. I sat on the bed, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. He stood in the doorway, hesitant. "Need anything else?" he asked. I shook my head, offering a soft smile. "Thank you, Daniel, for tonight." He nodded but didn't move. His eyes searched mine and something passed between us, silent, complicated, wrong. Then he stepped into the room and pulled the blanket up around me, gently, like tucking in a child. His hand lingered on my shoulder and I didn't stop him. I should have. The room dimmed as he turned off the light. I closed my eyes, expecting to hear the door click shut. But I didn't. I only remember a deep sense of unease washing over me, an instinct, a whisper of warning that came too late. When I woke, the house was still dark. The clock blinked 3:12 a.m., and my blanket had shifted. I sat up, disoriented, heart pounding without reason. Something in me knew something had changed, though I couldn't name it. I was alone. The door was closed, and the silence was different, denser, uncomfortable, final. I lay back down, trembling beneath the sheets, my thoughts unraveling faster than I could contain them. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the end of everything I thought I understood, and the beginning of a truth I was afraid to face. The morning after felt unreal, like waking from a dream you can't quite remember but still feel deep in your chest. I moved through the house with mechanical precision, boiling water for tea, feeding the cat, folding a blanket that hadn't been used. But inside, I was unraveling. My thoughts wouldn't settle. Every glance at Daniel brought a rush of confusion, shame, and something I couldn't yet name. Fear, maybe. Or betrayal. He greeted me as usual, cheerful and calm, asking if I'd slept well. His voice was light, too light. I nodded, forcing a smile, my heart pounding with the weight of pretending. I searched his face for any sign that he felt what I did. But he was unreadable, as if the night before had never happened. Was it all in my head? I spent the rest of the day in a fog. My hands trembled when I touched door handles, when I poured tea, when I brushed past the space where he had stood. I told myself I was overthinking, that I'd misinterpreted everything. But then I'd remember the feeling in my chest at 3 a.m., that visceral sense that something had been wrong. Something had been wrong. I tried to convince myself I was mistaken, that no boundary had been crossed, but denial is a fragile shield, and it shattered each time he entered the room. I started avoiding him, skipping meals we once shared, claiming headaches or deadlines. I stopped watching movies at night. I began locking my door. Daniel noticed, of course. "Are you okay?" he asked one evening, knocking lightly on my bedroom door. "You've been distant." I lied. Just tired. He stood outside for a few seconds, then walked away. I listened to his footsteps disappear down the hall, and I cried quietly into my pillow, angry at him but angrier at myself, for trusting, for questioning, for not knowing what to do. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? What would I even say? There was no proof, no bruises, just a fracture in my spirit, a wound invisible to the eye. And besides, what did that make me? A foolish woman who misread her own nephew? Or a victim who had been taken advantage of by someone she once called family? The days passed slowly, filled with silence and strained politeness. I couldn't look him in the eye. I couldn't laugh anymore. The warmth between us had curdled into unease, and every moment of kindness he offered now felt like manipulation. I had loved him like a son. I had trusted him with my home, my heart, my history, and now I no longer felt safe in my own skin. But I knew one thing with certainty. Something had changed that night. Something that couldn't be undone with apologies or silence. And I wasn't sure if healing would ever be possible with him still under my roof. It took me weeks to gather the strength to admit the truth to myself. What happened that night wasn't a dream, nor was it confusion. It was a betrayal, a violation cloaked in silence. The more I tried to move on, the more my body resisted. I stopped sleeping through the night. My appetite vanished. Even the house felt different, cold, unfamiliar. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a reminder. Daniel continued as though nothing had changed. He was polite, helpful, and always overly concerned, which only deepened my unease. The duplicity of his behavior gnawed at me. How could he be so normal, so composed after stealing? Something from me I couldn't even name out loud? I began keeping my distance entirely. I left early for work and returned late. I kept my door locked at all hours. Even his voice through the walls made my skin crawl. I knew I couldn't live like this. Not with him there. Not with that memory festering in every corner of the house. One Saturday morning, I stood in the kitchen clutching my coffee cup, hands trembling. Daniel came in, smiling faintly. "We should do something together today," he said. "It's been a while." I didn't answer right away. I looked up at him. Really looked. And for the first time I felt nothing but clarity. The warmth I once felt was gone. What remained was resolve. "I think it's time you found another place to stay," I said, voice steadier than I expected. His smile faded. "What? Why? Did I do something wrong?" I paused. Every part of me wanted to scream the truth, to call him out, to demand he admit what happened. But I knew better. I didn't need validation. I needed distance. "This just isn't working anymore," I said quietly. "It's better for both of us." He stood there, frozen, then looked away. "All right," he said after a moment. "If that's what you want." It wasn't just what I wanted, it was what I needed. That evening he began packing. There were no more words, no confrontation, just silence. And in that silence I found a strange sense of peace. After he left, the house felt eerily still. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't fear the quiet. I welcomed it. It was mine again. I was mine again. The healing didn't come overnight. Some nights I still wake up at 3:12 a.m. My heart still races when I pass by the guest room. But each day I remind myself, I survived. I reclaimed my space. And most importantly, I listened to my instincts when it mattered most. I'll never fully understand why he did what he did. But I no longer need answers from him. What I needed was closure, and I gave that to myself. Because sometimes survival doesn't come from fighting, it comes from letting go.